right? I think that's what they're called. They were like, yo, dude, what's poppin'? They were like, oh, I'm good. What kind of music do you listen to? And I was like, I'm a big metal fan, you know? And that's my joke.
All right. Thank you, Cassius. I hope you guys all laughed like on your muted microphone for that one. And then we're going to go on to the agenda slide, Eric. So the agenda for today, obviously we've already been through a welcome, but the next piece is gonna we're gonna lay out a couple of foundations in youth work or in partnerships for you guys to think through and just kind of have in the back of your mind as we move through this training. Then we also have a couple speakers, and we will be sharing just our stories around partnership. Throughout this development of this training, we really landed on the idea that the stories are what makes partnership rich, and we're going to use that as a vehicle to teach you guys. And then we're going to take a quick moment. You know, we started late, so hopefully you guys all got your break in before we even started. But we're going to just take a quick break and ask you guys to do an activity for about 5 minutes on your own. Then we're going to come back and define the term balance as defined by Cassius and I throughout this project. Then finally, we're going to have a little bit of movement and bring you guys into breakout rooms and ask you to do some discussion and reflection based on the kind of concepts or ideas that you heard during the first part of the training. So that's our agenda. Like we said, hit us up in the chat if you have questions or anything you want to add. Because we're online, we're just going to kind of keep rolling. Cassius, it's to you.
Great. Next slide, please. Eric. He's so wonderful. You did. Awesome. Okay, so tech norms. We ask that you keep yourself on mute. Oh, well, Eric went over some of these, but I'm just going to reiterate them. I ask that you keep yourself on mute the entire time unless you were talking, so as to prevent background noise from the speakers. I also ask that you turn your video on. Of course, if you can't or you do not want to, that is fine. We are recording. But even though I am in an empty room, I guess I like feeling like I'm not, I like feeling like I'm actually talking to someone. We will be using the chat and raise your hand feature today. So please use the chat appropriately. The raise your hand feature is located in the participants section. So click on the participants and you should see a little blue hand always waving at you. And remember to lower your hand after you are called on. Now that we have those norms set up, I'm going to pass it back to Caitlin.
Like I said at the beginning, thank you, I'm back. We're just gonna talk real briefly. Like I'm gonna try to really get through this as quick as I can because we know there's some more meaty stuff at the end, but I just wanna know from the crowd, and I'll kind of scan through, or you can put your hand up. Have you guys heard of or used the YPQA, the Youth Program Assessment, in your training? Throw your hand up visually or put it in the chat just so I can start to see who knows what. And then on the same vein, have you heard of Hart's Ladder? So just kind of wanting to say to you guys, the reason I'm asking for this kind of knowledge pulse check is because we're not going to spend a ton of time on these, but want to kind of talk a little bit about how they relate to what we are doing here today. So as I talk about these two concepts, I just really want you to be kind of like a critical listener of these. So hopefully you have some grounded knowledge because I'm not going through everything, but I want you to be critical and think about what's missing, to think about if the visuals of the pyramid and the ladder speak to you. Do they work for you? Have they worked in your programs in the past? I'm not.
Also, another thing, we are going to be sharing these resources out. So if you do want to look further into these, we're going to be sharing it.
Of course, yep. So basically just using these as a way to outline partnership, to think about partnership. Obviously there's so many variables in working with another person, and to achieve like a shared goal, people tend to have to set aside their own objective or maybe a prescribed outcome. So anyways, just wanting to kind of refresh us on these two concepts. So Eric, if you want to go on to the next slide. Hopefully you guys have all seen the pyramid before, and really wanting just you guys to think about the top of the pyramid, thinking about engagement as we move into the training. So at the top of the pyramid on the YPQA, you will find things like planning, choice, and reflection. I feel like I'm probably talking to people who know this like the back of their hand. I don't want to make assumptions, but so when you think about planning, are you engaging youth and making the plans in how, what kind of projects or activities or how they spend time in your programming? Do they have multiple opportunities or strategies to make those plans? Are you engaging different ways like writing and drawing and discussion? When you think about choice, do young people have opportunities to both make content and process choice? So are they engaged in what they are learning and how they are learning it? And then finally, in regards to quality, are you doing intentional reflection? Do youth have a chance to practice that skill? Are you intentionally asking for feedback? Are you encouraging youth to have discussions and journal? And then like, are you taking that feedback and that reflection to inform the way that you design your programs? So as most of you really know, this tool is used at a snapshot or a point of contact between young people and a youth worker. And so basically, we just wanted you guys to be able to think about that. And I really think of quality as being at its highest point when young people are trained on this tool and they're engaged in understanding what quality looks like within their program. So next slide, please, Eric. And like I said, raise your hand, interrupt me if you want questions. Okay, so Hart's ladder, maybe not quite as popular in our field as the YPQA, but the sociologist Robert Hart wrote a book back in the 90s. It's the groundbreaking model for thinking about how young people and adult allies partner, and the ladder is the most significant tool that like emerged from the book. So again, very brief because I'm trying to get us back on track. But towards what I would say the bottom of the ladder is where you find elements of non-participation around manipulation, declaration, and tokenism. And again, this is all very easily searchable on Google to find really definitions of each one of these rungs. But there's 8 rungs as you work your way up this ladder, from non-participation to participation. As you get to the top, there's kind of a debate in the world between rung 7 and 8. Rung 7 and 8 are obviously kind of the places where this adult and youth partnership really fits. So between rung 7 and 8, you know, the debate is really which one of those is, you know, the more high quality or the better way to think about youth participation. Is it young people initiated with shared decisions, or is it young people initiated and directed? And I think if we had time to, you know, dig into this and keep going, there's probably other elements of, you know, ways we could adjust and change those to really fit into the way we, you know, we or I or you know, perceive participation and partnership. So I know that was really quick, but I wanted you guys just to kind of see these 2 visuals. We wanted you guys to see these 2 visuals and kind of use these pieces as we move forward. Okay, so I'm going to pause. I don't see any chats or questions, so I feel like it's okay to move forward. People's faces look okay. So thank you for listening to that. We really kind of just struggled with making sure we had an element like this in the training for you guys. And then I'm going to kick it to Cassius, who's going to get us started in the next part. Thank you for listening.
Yes. Eric, if you could stop screen sharing for a moment, that would be wonderful. Thank you. We now have a guest speaker. Her name is Juan. She works in the KYC at the Science Museum as the Media and Tech Crew Manager. So, Juan.
Real quick before you start, just to throw it out there, like as you guys listen to these next 3 stories, I really encourage you to be active listeners. Write down any key concepts or thoughts, ideas that come across, so that when we move forward in the discussion later, you might have something to refer back to. Okay, sorry.
Yes, and if you have questions for On, she will be answering them at the end of her share out. So put them in the chat or just remember them and put your hand up and she will call on you when she's done.
Hey everyone, can y'all hear me? All right, sweet. Again, my name is Wan Vu. I work at the Kitty Anderson Youth Science Center, which is a program at the Science Museum in Minnesota. And I've actually been there since 2008. So I think that's like 12 years, which is a really long time. And I say, and like, that's a long time, especially for like a millennial like me to be in one place. Although I had like some different jobs early on, but I've always been at the KYC since 2008. But yeah, I've been there for so long because I really love the KYC. Yeah, the work really resonates with me. So to give you a background on what the KYC is, if y'all don't know, we actually work with elementary, middle school, high school, and post-high school youth, like, young folks up to ages 25. Our middle school program is volunteer-based, and it's about exposing youth of color, youth from low-income backgrounds, young women, and other marginalized identities. Sorry, when I say youth of color, also Indigenous youth too, just want to call it out. Yeah, and exposing those folks to the STEM fields in the middle school portion. In high school, they are actually hired to work with us. So it's a paid job. And then post high school too, they can come back for internships and more leadership positions. And, we've had folks who, like me, who've gone from the program from all the way from middle school to high school to someone who is now in charge of our internships and Making Connections program, and that would be Rich Pennington, if y'all know him. Yeah, so it's a really beautiful program, and I think one of the big things that keeps me at the Science Museum is that when I first started the program, I've been in it for so long, I've actually seen the cultural shifts in youth development. And so our program started as a way to get young folks, like folks of color and Indigenous folks, into STEM fields. And they thought that, okay, if we just expose young people to STEM and tell them it's like, you're gonna get a job from this, then that they would be like enthusiastic enough to be there. But then that there's so many other aspects that like keep people engaged in youth development programs. And so one of the shifts that I saw while being there is when I first started, it was a lot of like white identifying people, adults in the space who were then working with youth of color and didn't really have the same like backgrounds, right? And so it wasn't until Anika Ward was hired as the director when a lot of that chart started to shift. And I think she said, no, it's really important that like these young folks are seeing themselves in the adult staff that are also working, and that they can connect in that way. And that's more important than them having a degree in science, right? And so that was a totally new thing, and that was something that she fought for. And so it's made a huge difference. And for me as like a Vietnamese second gen kid who lived in rural Minnesota, coming to the KYC and being in that space was like life-giving for me. And I learned so much about myself. Like I struggled a lot in school, and actually was the KYC that helped me realize that I struggled in school because I had like a fixed mindset, and I had a really bad experiences with education. But in the KYC, I was like learning a lot more of like how that was happening and why racism impacts education. So I'm just super thankful for the KYC in that way. And so now I'll get on to a little bit about what I actually do at the KYC, and some lessons I've learned in terms of youth development and working with youth online more recently because of the pandemic. So Eric, if you could start the photo slideshow. So yeah, again, KYC has gone through some changes. Like we said before, or like I said before, you know, young people were first just being exposed to STEM and really encouraged to pursue careers in STEM because they're underrepresented and they can make lots of money in STEM, but you know, that's not enough, right? And so the first photo that y'all are seeing is the Teen Tech Crew. And so they started in 2011. And yeah, those are some young folks I worked with for a really long time, and they mean a lot to me. And yeah, I still have close relationships with a lot of them. So nowadays, we're not just saying, let's get young folks into STEM. We're saying that we want to use STEM to dismantle systems of oppression, and that these young people, and they have always been, are going to get paid to do that, right? So Eric, if you could go back to the first slide and then maybe just pause it. And if it's okay with you, I'll let you know when to go to the next slide. Yeah. So yeah, we're asking that, when we work with young people and when we're paying them to do this work, that we know that the way to get them into STEM is for the work to have like a real impact, right? And that's and that for us means like changing like the systemic oppression that leads to like these outcomes of like why young people or youth of color and young women and indigenous youth are not in the STEM field, right? Like we have to look at the systemic oppression of why that is, right? So understanding that and addressing those issues is now something the KYC is. That's our goal. So early on, Teen Tech Crew was doing this, but in more of a tangential way. And that is, we weren't explicit about like maybe those systems of oppression. So young people instead were working in libraries and they were delivering these, as you can see with the first photo, this is Mo, and he's teaching how to make music on a computer. And so they were working with young folks their age in libraries to teach them, like fun technology workshops. Go to the next slide. And this is a young person who made this light up LED card. Go to the next one. It's really, he created this like really beautiful message on the inside. And so the young people really like loved these workshops, the people who attended and the Teen Tech Crew members themselves. They got to, I felt like that was more of like a youth adult partnership, because really in that situation, I was there to like support the young people. So they got to say what workshops they wanted to lead, right? They were the ones who knew the young people and the other teens they were working with best as like a peer-to-peer mentorship. So they got to pitch the workshops. And what they would do is they would do a bunch of research, and then they would present their pitches, and then the team would vote on which workshops they wanted to present for the next 12 months, right? And so in that way, it was a lot of youth choice. And also when they were doing the research, their learning was led by themselves, right? And so they would look up tutorials online, but it wasn't me who was coming with the content and teaching them how to do it. I think, Cassius will talk about this later. So it really wasn't the model of like, you young folks, I'm here to teach you and you're a vessel to be filled, right? It was really like, okay, you like this idea, you want to learn how to make electronic cards, then great, like, let's do the research, let's figure this out online. And some of the things I would do when they were not there, and I would, do some behind the scenes work to help them troubleshoot, and then I would like support them. But again, there was like a lot of high engagement because the young folks were leading their own learning. And at the end of the day, they knew if they didn't, finish the prep for the workshop, if they didn't understand the content themselves, then they would be in the library kind of floundering, right? So there was a lot of like genuine motivation and buy-in to do the work. So yeah, that was the awesome thing about Teen Tech Crew. We can go through these other pictures. Yep, that's them with the 3D printer. We can go to the next one. That's printing some stuff. Keep going. That's them leading the workshop again, like I was mentioning. Keep going. And then this is a photo of Media and Tech Crew from the year, let's see, this was like 2019, I guess. Yeah, it was only 2019, it was last summer. So a big shift in our program happened, which is that the Teen Tech Crew, some pitfalls of that was that the young folks really were highly engaged, but they were presenting workshops that only lasted a month. So they felt like they couldn't get really in depth with their projects and learn more like higher level skills that they felt like could possibly apply to careers, right? So that was like something they identified as like, you know, like I feel like I'm a really great teacher, but if I actually want to go into a STEM field, I don't know that I necessarily have the skills to do that. And so we took a look at our program and tried to address that, and we came up with a new model. And that new model, again, has some great things going for it, but it also has some drawbacks. And so the focus now really is that the young folks are learning high level STEM skills so they can get a job. And you can go to the next photo. But as a result, so this is Levi, and he is presenting some photos he did or took. And he also got to enroll in a workshop with Wing Young Huey, who's a local photographer. So the great thing again is the projects were a lot longer. They got to learn more skills, but because we said the focus should be really high level STEM skills, whatever that means, right? Meant that like I was doing a lot of the teaching, and that young folks were having to learn from me. So there was a lot less decision making, and there was more focus on skills as opposed to what are the youth doing with these skills, right? Like, who are they serving? And so I think there's less engagement in that way. Yeah, and community, which was such a huge part of the Teen Tech Crew and why everyone loved each other so much. I think that's also fallen by the wayside because the young folks are in bigger groups. We're trying to serve more youth, serve 20 youth because of like funding resources. So you can see that while we're trying to do good youth development, funding is really, is kind of also pigeonholing us and cutting the program back in certain ways too. So that's a little bit about what the youth, the KYC program is about, and some lessons that I've learned. And I just want to say in terms of online programming, I know Cassius is going to get to this more, but the same lessons still apply. Community is like absolutely number one, super important. So we do things like we play games at the beginning, and we always do check-ins, high and lows or goofy questions. So there's lots of different online games and lots of physical games, whether it's heads up, that we still do. And that young people still need connections, and they can't have connections on the screen. So you have to be creative about how you do that. So sometimes that looks like pairing young folks with partners, and they break into smaller groups to do their work or do one-on-one work, or they do work offline. So yeah, that is a little bit
question
about
time. Yeah, we should go to questions now.
Thanks, Cassius. Yeah, any questions? Is it in the chat?
So yeah, I don't see any questions coming through in the chat right now. Everybody good?
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, I'm sorry. I was muted. I'm sorry.
Perfect. No, go ahead.
I was just wondering if with the program shift to having it be more like you in the position of being a leader, how the participants, like the young people, like feel about that? Like what they know the program to have been different before. Like I understand that they're obviously like the goal of like getting harder skills is being met, but what does that reflection, that kind of constant reflection look like for you all right now?
Yeah, and I feel like there's been a lot of tension around that issue, and I think actually some of that tension I experience is sometimes with Cassius could speak to it too, but I think people feel frustrated that they're not trusted to lead their own learning, that they have less agency in what they get to learn, and yeah, and also that when you're working with 20 people and trying to teach them something, everyone learns at different rates, and so there's also a lot of frustration that too is like some people want to like move on and some people don't get it. So it's, yeah, I think it's been hard. Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily the greatest youth work sometimes either, to be real.
Are there conversations about that shifting then with those reflections at this time? Or I know that obviously like programming is so bizarre figuring it out right now, but like what does that feel like to you?
Yeah, so we're actually furloughed right now. I've been furloughed for a couple of months. But before this, yeah, we were having these conversations and taking stock at how can we make sure that there's like authentic youth engagement, and how this new model does, yeah, it really does cut back on youth leadership and yeah, a lot of the things I talked about. I don't know, just to say that there's tensions and we're trying to figure it out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Cassius, should I just throw it to myself and keep going? Okay. So I'm just going to try to share a little bit with you guys about the journey Cassius and I went on to create this training. I've been in the youth development field since I was young, and I've worked with youth alongside on projects in the community, on boards, on special events. But when this opportunity came up, I really clicked into it because I thought it would be really interesting to think about how to partner with young people to develop trainings online as we were all kind of making that shift. And luckily, Cassius applied, and Cassius was also interested in digging a little deeper into youth-adult partnership. So I'm going to kind of I took notes throughout all of our meetings, and I'm going to kind of tell you guys our story as a model and a way to maybe kind of try to adjust and use this in your own work. And I should just note that Cassius gave me permission to share this story, just so you guys all know. I know we all care about young people and making sure that we are honoring them. And I also should say, Cassius is my partner. Cassius and I have really worked on this. So Cassius is a youth, but Cassius is my partner. So anyways, Cassius and I really started by talking about certain terms. We developed our own language, so you'll hear me kind of reference some of the concepts that we built together. One of the first things we really talked about was this idea of letting youth lead, or as Cassius said, adults let us lead. And we really decided we wanted to kind of shift that perspective. We wanted to move away from language like let and allow, and really build on ideas like trust and opportunity and communication. We wanted the people in this training to really think about terms like youth leadership and participation and engagement, and the importance of youth voice. And we wanted to really highlight the things that we were both good at, and we wanted to challenge ourselves to try new things. And we wanted to capture the nitty-gritty of the details that go into not only moving programs online, creating partnerships online as well. We wanted to be able to define the term working together, which really translated into working with each other. We spent time on things like Hart's Ladder and the YPQA, and we came up with ways to discuss those things. So we came up with this whole idea of the dishes. So really be a way that we talked about partnership. how do you partner with someone to do the dishes, and what would those levels of partnership look like when applying something like Hart's ladder to that? So we kicked around a lot of scenarios and thinking about how things happen in school and at work or at home. Let's see, we talked a little bit about kind of what was already referenced about this idea that youth are empty vessels to be poured into. We obviously disagree with that and know youth are filled up, and they're filled up with more than we can ever imagine, and stuff that they could pour into us as adults. And we also talked about how sometimes young people, if are getting poured into, don't necessarily want that information anyways. We spent a lot of time really creating all these documents and pieces and agendas, and became kind of bogged down by documents and process. And one day Cassius was like, okay, stop, like this isn't working. We need to back up and create something that works for me. We're gonna create this one document, and it's gonna be really straightforward and super easy. And we kind of threw everything away and started over. And it was hard for me, but I was like, this is good. Like, I trust this. This is good. I trust my partner. And it meant to me that we were both like in a place where we felt safe and valued. Cassius and I didn't know each other. We've never met in person. We haven't like been in programs together. So that also added an interesting layer to the way that we worked. Let's see, throughout the process, I kept saying, you know, how important it was to document the training, because like I said, we're two people that didn't know each other. We're working online in a pandemic during the end of the school year with kind of our community exploding in tragedy. And we found a way still to trust each other and partner and create this training for you guys. We found objectives and goals that we agreed upon. Another thing that I thought really was cool in our work together is we came up with this concept of the strawberry. And the strawberry, like the dishes, represented something to us. So the strawberry was Hart's Ladder and the YPQA. And Cassius I was kind of not sure if that was the right stuff to put into this training, and kind of Cassius watched me spin on it for a while. And Cassius said, it's the strawberry. It's not a bland vegetable, and it's not a piece of candy, but it still tastes good and it's important. So we kept it in. We kept the strawberry in. Let's see. So basically kind of realized we were telling our story. Like, this is really what the training is about. This has become like a case study. And so I'm just gonna rattle off what our process was. We built relationships. We determined objectives. We developed roles. We shared our strengths and our weaknesses. We created plans, we troubleshooted, we reframed, we recommitted. We had schedules and decisions and concept development and agendas and timelines. But we also had human interaction and real stories. We had an appreciation and a groove, and we followed everything through till completion, right? We're working through that right now. You know, Cassius and I had to get to know each other online. So behind Cassius is a science experiment that is moldy bread growing. And so over the course of, you know, since May, I'm watching this bread grow and I don't know what it is. And so we're having conversations about it. And I know things about, you know, Cassius's knees and Cassius going water jet skiing with grandpa. And, you know, we did all this on Zoom with families interrupting and vacuuming and cooking and all kinds of things going on in the background. But we both showed up and we both asked questions. And we compromised. And I learned a lot from Cassius. I learned a lot from the honesty. One day Cassius was like, I'm not a good partner. I'm not good at working with people. To which I said, like, nobody is. Partnership's not easy. It's easy to plan something within your own head and just move forward. But like, what's gained if you do everything on your own? And what do you really discover about yourself, right? All right, so that's my story for now, or our story. Cassius is gonna jump in and share a little bit.
Did you want to do questions?
Do you guys have questions, or maybe after you talk, Cassius, we can see?
Okay. I guess I'll just like start talking then. Great. You already know this. My name is Cassius. I use she, her pronouns. Even though you are all adults, I just want to pretend that we're all in kindergarten, because I guess why not? let's say that the teacher assigns some groups and then one group leader. In one group, we have a group leader named Sprinkles. He's known for putting sprinkles on his lunch. Sprinkles got lucky and got put in a group with his best friend named Sparkles, who puts sparkles on everything. The project is to put on a little skit. So Sprinkles is the given leader, and he says that him and his friend Sparkles are going to come up with an act. Then the third member who says, we'll make the set. We're going to call the third member Bob. Bob uses they, them pronouns. Bob is confused and decides after a few minutes that, I'm going to go check in with the rest of the group to see what the set should be because they still don't know. They weren't told. Sparkle says it's going to be about getting up in the morning. They check in with Sprinkles because he's the group leader, but he's talking with other group leaders coming up with skit ideas. He shoos them off when they try to talk to him, and Bob still doesn't know what they should do, so they make a bed. Yes, a kindergartner made a bed, but that's okay because this is like a fake scene. In the end, they failed the project because, none of them talked. If they had talked, they would have found out that, they have a bunch of skills that no one actually knew about. And that would have been pretty cool. So I guess the moral of the story is to communicate with the youth because communication is a really big key. Miranda Bryans has a question, and my response to that is to communicate with the youth because we know what our limits are and we know what we want. At least most of the time we do. Sometimes we do need help or support. And if you see that we need that help or support, be willing to give that to us. I don't speak behalf on all the youth, but, we do appreciate help. Yep, that's my... Sorry, I'm looking at my notes because I couldn't memorize all of this. Okay, that is an example of a not so good, partnership, but this is a working with adults and, adults and youth working together. So my experience working with adults isn't the best. At school, I'm mainly used as a token because I do go to a majority white school, which means that if I am in a group, it's like, hey, look at us. We have the model minority. We have the Asian kid with us, so we're going to do good. And I'm mainly just used as a token. And I'm there for the looks, not really for my input or my leadership or like my experience. So that's not a good partnership. I didn't know what was going on. But when I was working with Caitlin, I felt like my brain was valued. That sounds like a weird thing. My brain is valued, but it did feel like that. We communicated, we stayed open, we were able to compromise when we didn't agree or we had some other thoughts. That was nice. We were able to talk, really talk, because we had built that trust of I know you're gonna listen to me and you understand, and I understand that, we have a very large age gap, but we're still going to work together on this because we know how to work with each other because we talked about that. So yeah.
Good.
I don't have a good conclusion for that, but that's my spiel.
More to come. So we're gonna does anybody have follow-up questions? I know we got one in the chat. Again, you will have the opportunity to talk to each other in a little while. And of course, Cassius and I are available for follow-up, but anybody want to unmute before we go into our next step? All right. I'm giving that awkward pause. All right. Cassius, do you want to do the activity?
Yes.
Okay. So Eric, will you throw up the slide that says break time on it? This is going to be your quick break.
Yes, so during this time, if you would like to, you do not have to, but if you would like to go and find an object that represents balance to you. So it could really be anything. It's what balance means to you. So this is the time for you to start thinking about what balance means in your life, how you see it, how you interpret it, just all that. So 5 minutes, y'all.
So take a quick 5 minutes. We'd like to be obviously starting back by 2:08. We don't plan to have you guys like take your turn sharing your item. We just want you to think about it, and then we might just ask you to show it to us. So see you in 5. The chat, please, what you found. And like I said, we're not gonna like go around and have everybody share. It's mostly just for you to think about balance. So I'm gonna give it a minute. Thank you.
So I know that we weren't supposed to necessarily talk, but Cecilia Huffman, let me just say, I am a humongous Lion King fan. That was like what I watched as my childhood 6 times every day.
Hold it up against Cecilia. I didn't see what you guys. Yes, Hakuna Matata. Got it. Thank you. All right. Anybody else want to you can just throw it up in the chat. So we have a fidget spinner, a glass of water, a picture of mom, a pen, small statue of someone leaping forward with a huge heart, a yoga mat. I just ran to the bathroom and got deodorant. I don't know. I think that's pretty straightforward, right? Some pH, some balance. Let's see. Did I miss anything? A fake plant. It's a perfect decoration. Yes, decoration and no maintenance. Pictures of family. All right. Okay. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you for participating in that. Eric, when you get a second, we're gonna go to that next slide for a quick visual. And I'm gonna just kind of run you guys through why we brought up balance. And then we're gonna move into our discussion. Now this, Eric did share a link to this, or like its full form. I know it's pretty simple, but in one of our attempts to like synthesize what we did during this training development, we came up with kind of an acronym or a way to think about balance as like a leading force and partnering with young people. As Eric goes back to the chart, sorry, for B, I got it right here. For B, we really wanted to talk about building trust, and that being a place where you start to do those beginning pieces around, getting to know each other and talking about strengths and weaknesses. I lost my big technical difficulty. Hold on one sec. Shoot. And so other things for balance are follow through. And then once you get to know that person and you have an idea of who they are, you can figure out the next step of how to actively develop together. So the A is really about that development piece. So the stuff I riddled off, right? Thinking about your process, your objective, your roles, your concepts, and your plans. And then moving into L, it's this idea that we're like all consistently learning, right? That's supposed to say learn as you go, not learn as you groove. That's my apologies. I made an edit there, I guess. But learn as you go.
I'm sorry, that was me, because Eric had like put a comment on it and was like, there's another O in groove. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's all right. We're grooving, we're growing, and we have a grove apparently. So the document you guys get should be correct. But it's all good. So the learn as you go is about troubleshooting, reframing, and dealing with those kind of real life roadblocks. Realizing that mistakes and challenges happen and that you have to be open-minded and then get back on track. The A is acquiring a groove. So that's where you think about like that tempo, that ability to like riff off each other and to adjust to the unknown. The N is something I kind of referenced, right? The nitty gritty, right? So that's the scheduling and the agendas and the tasks and the timelines. determining what works for you two or the group as partners. The C is communicate, or as Cassius and I kind of couldn't decide, it's also being, what's our other C?
Compromise.
Cassius. Oh, compromise, yes. Okay, or being open to compromise. So you could use either one of those. But it's the place where like the questions and the ideas, the decisions, and the appreciation happen. And then E is pretty straightforward, ending strong, right? So you have your goals, you set what you want to complete, you have a place for reflection and closure, and then celebration. So as I mentioned, like Cassius and I have never met, and I don't even know how we're gonna celebrate this big thing together. We're gonna Zoom together, I don't know. But this is something, a way to, really full circle acknowledge all the hours and the work and the Zoom meetings that go into a partnership like this. So again, talking fast, but just keep wanting to keep us on track. We have about 16 minutes left for the training, and Cassius is going to move us into breakout rooms. Go ahead, Cassius.
Yes, next slide, please, Eric. Great, so you all will be put into breakout rooms. I encourage you to talk because it is more fun and stimulating to the brain. You will have not 20 minutes to talk, you will have 15 minutes to talk. Select a spokesperson at the end and a note taker to like collect information as you go. And when you guys come back, that spokesperson will speak for the group and talk about what you guys talked about. There are questions on the right that you guys can discuss. However, it is not forced. It is not mandatory. It's not like you guys are getting a grade for this workshop. So, it's pretty open. You can talk about whatever you need to. Yeah, and when the spokesperson shares, keep it nice and brief, since there are quite a few people. And yeah, thanks, y'all.
Okay, so Erica, you're gonna help us get into these breakout rooms, right? Okay. So welcome back. I hope that worked both functionally as an online learning experience, but that you guys were also able to talk to each other a little bit. We only have a few minutes left and we really want to be respectful of time. So did each group kind of elect somebody to briefly come back and share? And if that's you, come off mute and we'll just take turns sharing.
So unfortunately, Bridget couldn't hear what Robin and I were discussing, but and just super briefly, Robin and I kind of discussed changing and adjusting like our language. One thing that stood out to me was when you guys said like instead of saying like let youth lead, changing the language to allow not allow, but trust youth to lead, and how impactful just changing those languages in yourself when you're talking about youth, with youth, around, changing that language and incorporating that change of language in your day-to-day conversations would be huge and extremely impactful. And then we also discussed meeting youth at their level instead of expecting youth to meet us at our level. So that's kind of what we were discussing.
Thank you for sharing that, Cecilia. I appreciate that feedback and to really click into the idea of the language that we use. Anybody else? Okay, no pressure. I hope that I'll give it a minute. I'm quick to move through awkward science, so let's just hold out. Let you guys think about it. Cassius, what do you think?
I think Justin wants to say something.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Justin.
I can just jump in quick. I have a meeting at 2:30, so I apologize. I have to leave.
That's cool. Thanks, Justin.
Mary and I had a chance to talk a little bit, and what really stood out to us, in addition to some of the things that Cecilia said, were just the presence of trust that was apparent in all three, and then really starting with a clean slate, and just the feeling of being genuine in these relationships, and having this feeling of being on the same level and helping to build that feeling, I think was present. So those were some of the things that we talked about. We missed some of the questions. We didn't have a chance to write them down, and I think we missed them when they hopped in, but yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Any other final thoughts? Cassius?
I can jump in with our
thanks,
group.
Miranda. Yeah.
Sure. So it was Katrina and me, and Katrina had to pop out. but we talked about how we thought that the framework of tools would be helpful, and we're looking forward to using that to guide our thinking, the YPQA that you shared, and also to be able to look out for some of the pitfalls that you mentioned. And yeah, I think that was it.
Thank you. Thanks, Miranda. All right, Cassius, you got anything you want to throw out there before we give them our final question and action?
I do. In response to what Cecilia said, I just want to point out that like the way that adults treat like youth, if it's like through an organization, like through Sprockets, I'm more motivated to like, you know, go through Sprockets again. So like the way that adults interact with us really does affect us and our trust with just adults in general. I know it seems obvious, but every once in a while I do know that like people forget that the way you interact with people, regardless of age, sticks with them. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Cool. Thanks, Cassius. So Cassius and I did plan a reflection question. We're just going to ask you to take it with you. And it's very straightforward. Just how do you plan to strengthen your the way you partner with youth, and layering that with specifically online. So we want you just to walk away and continue to think about how you can make that partnership stronger. And I want to say thank you and apologize again for us starting late. And I don't know if Zong or Eric or Cassius says anything else, but otherwise, thank you.